Hello, dear friends, and welcome back to the Aligned Path, where stitches become spells and the humming of your sewing machine sounds a little bit like a familiar purr. Tonight, we're stepping into the old craft of needle and thread, not just to sew, but to mend, to restore, and to weave a little bit of magic back into the things we wear and use every single day. Witches have always been makers. Weavers of cloth, weavers of fate, and weavers of our own tools. And when we keep our tools clean, even something as modern as our sewing machine, we're honoring our craft. We're clearing away old snags so our intentions can run smoothly. In today's video, I am going to be showing you the absolute basics about how to use your sewing machine. So whether you're mending a torn hem or stitching something brand new, sewing is a way of saying nothing is disposable, not even myself. As witches, it's really important that we remember and learn how to repair, restore, and create. And that, in its own quiet way, sewing is witchcraft. So before we dive into the technicals of how to keep your machine running smoothly, we're going to talk about why sewing is such a powerful tool in the witch's hand. First off, mending is a reclamation of your power. Being able to fix your own clothes means they're not disposable, which means your dollar will go farther and your life will be a little bit more sustainable. When you're able to repair something, you're extending the life of that garment, which makes you focus on a mindset of resourcefulness, which is very, very witchy. Sewing is an essential skill for any witch who wants to be able to make their own poppets, satchels, dream bags, and all the other accoutrements a witch may need. When you're sewing a new garment, or anything for that matter, you can consider color magic. Thinking black for protection, green for prosperity, or white for purification. That's a fun little way to incorporate magic into everything that you sew. Thread is binding magic. Historically, witches used string and thread in knot magic, binding wishes, banishing, or to seal intentions. Sewing is simply a domestic version of that. You're binding material together to hold a purpose. And just like we clean and cleanse the tools on our altar, we need to clean and cleanse our sewing machines. Cleaning your machine isn't just maintenance. It's a ritual reset. A stale or dusty machine means you're going to have snagged threads and snagged energy. A freshly cleaned machine means smooth stitching and smooth creation. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to clean our machine, oil our machine, thread our bobbin, thread our machine, and do our first little sewing project. It's super simple. I promise you will be able to follow along. So let's pull out our machines. Chances are you haven't been using it for a while, or maybe you've never used it. Before we do anything, we need to clear out all the dust. So my machine's not too dusty, but if your machine was loved and used before, it may have dust all inside here. This is where we put our bobbin. So you can see I'm just using a paintbrush to get into the little cracks in where we keep our bobbin. I'm cleaning out all behind. It's really not that complicated. Just clear out all the dust. Try to get in all the nooks and crannies. You might want to use a Q-tip, but I find just a dollar store paintbrush works great. We're just going to make sure you're looking all around, trying to get in underneath these feed dogs. That's those little petals that kind of push the fabric through underneath the foot. Just clean it all up. Then we're going to take off. My machine has one screw at the back. Yours may be a little bit different. If you can, take a peek at the manual online by Googling your machine. Or you may have your book with you. It's going to show you how to take this piece of your machine off. So mine has one screw at the back and that just removes the facing of the machine on the front. And again, I'm using a little piece of cotton here. You could use paper towel or a cloth, anything that's ideally lint-free. And you're just using your paintbrush or Q-tip, again, to remove any dust. So we want to get rid of the lint and the dust and the little fibers before we oil our machine. So this is the manual for my machine. And you'll find a spot if you have your manual or you look it up online that shows you where you need to oil your machine. Typically, you'll have about 5 or 6 spots in total that need to have a little bit of oil added to them, say 100 hours or so. It's really important to keep your machine oiled and cleaned so that your projects just run smoother. If your machine starts snagging things, if it starts squeaking, you're going to severely damage the life of your machine. And just as we ritualistically cleanse and clean our altar tools, we're doing the same for tools that make our life easier and more sustainable. So you're just going to add a little oil on each of the spots indicated in your book. Then I'm just using a little piece of cloth to remove any excess oil. We don't want any oil dripping down through our machines. Opening up and oiling your machine is also a really great way to get used to and comfortable with your machine. Sometimes when we're gifted a machine from our grandparents or our parents, it can just get left in the closet. It seems too intimidating to start to learn to sew. So I hope to be able to give you a little bit of guidance and encouragement to let you know it is not that difficult. In today's video, we are just covering the basics, getting your machine going and sewing your very first line. But in the future, I hope to make a few different sewing videos showing you guys how my mom taught me how to read patterns, how to cut patterns, how I drafted and created the pattern for my skirt cape, and how you could easily do it as well. All right, so my machine is oiled. I'm just throwing the front casing on, put the screw back in the back, and we have one more spot to oil down by the bobbin. Okay, so my last oiling point is down here in the bobbin carriage. So you pop the bottom piece off like this. Yours may pull to the left, yours may pull forward, or I've also seen them pivot. Fold down the little door, and we're going to pull out the bobbin. So you hold this little handle and pull it out, and that's how you can hold onto your bobbin case. When you go to put the bobbin casing back in, you have to hold that little handle out for it to click in with its arm in the proper spot. So I'm just adding a little oil down here. And again, wiping up any excess oil we have. We don't want that getting on our thread. We now need to put the bobbin case back in the bobbin assembly. So again, we pull the little handle out to hold onto it, and then align the upwards arm into the little arm groove. You'll see how it clicks in right there. Mine's right at 12 o'clock. Yours should be too. And we're done. Now that we oiled our machine, we need to run it at high speeds for, mine says, a few minutes. So I did about 3 minutes. This just allows your machine to move the oil all around its movable parts and get us ready to sew our first project. Now let's take a look and get familiar with all the different dials and buttons on your machine. Your machine should have almost all the same features as mine. This is a very basic model. Your dials and buttons may look slightly different, but they're all going to have similar function. First, this is our foot lever. So that brings our foot that holds your fabric down, up and down. On the side of your machine, you will have a dial. If you turn it forward, it sews forward. If you turn it backwards, it unsews. But basically, it lifts your needle up and down. Looking closely, you can see my needle is moving left to right, which means I have my machine set on a zigzag pattern. So one of your dials somewhere on your machine will show a straight line to zigzag. 0 means no zigzag, like this, a nice straight line. And then 5 is your widest step of a zigzag in terms of width of our stitch. Then for the length of our stitch, we have a second dial. 0 means it's actually not going to pull the fabric in. We're not going to be moving forward. 1 puts our stitches really tight. 2, 3, 4 are wider apart stitches. You will also have a toggle that might say RML or just have arrows. This is moving our stitch line. So if we were sewing a straight line, we could sew in the middle, on the left, or on the right of our foot. This is helpful when you're sewing really close to the edge and you're finding your feet and your little dog feeds aren't pulling your fabric through smoothly. You can choose to move your stitch more to the right so that you can have a little bit more of your fabric underneath the foot. Lastly, you'll have a tension dial. So tension is dependent on the density of the fabric. So something really low, like 0, 1, 2, 3, will be used for synthetics, light cottons. If you're looking up into thicker velvets, jean, you want to be up in 5, 6, 7. Being mindful that you're also swapping your needle to match the type of fabric. And lastly, you have a reverse button. This helps us sew off the end of a garment, just securing our seam. Today, I am sewing some reusable Christmas wrapping paper. It's just thrifted fabric that I'm sewing an edge on to prevent the fabric from fraying. But first, we need to choose a matching thread. This is how my mom taught me how to choose my matching thread. Obviously, between these 3 colors that I pull out, it's very obvious which color is the correct color. When you pull out just a single string, it should disappear on the fabric. This method is really helpful when you are choosing between 3 very similar shades. Obviously, the 2 yellows are just too yellow for this gold fabric. Now it's time to wind our bobbin. Girl, you do not need to be winding your bobbin by hand. Your machine is smart enough to wind a bobbin for you. Start by placing your thread on the spool pin, the stick over by the right. Your machine might have convenient little pictures like mine does. To thread the bobbin, we're following the dotted lines. So it goes down around this little post and then runs horizontally over to our bobbin. Take the end of your thread and thread it through one of the holes on your bobbin. You're going to go from the inside outward so that you have a little tiny string poking out the top. Now, take your bobbin and click it onto the bobbin feeder. Right here. It'll click down like that. Now, to start it, we click it over to the right, which will prevent the needle from moving while we feed our bobbin. Double check the path that your thread is taking from the thread pin. So mine goes down, around, across, and over top into my bobbin. And I have my little tail string that I can hold as I start to fill the first little bit of my bobbin. So when I push my button, push my pedal, my needle's not going to move, but my bobbin will start to fill. Once it has about 2 wraps on it, you can pause for a sec and cut the little tail off the top of your bobbin. And now you don't have to race, but we're going to fill our bobbin until the string starts touching the little bumper. Now that our bobbin is full, click the bobbin pin to the left and remove your bobbin. Snip your thread and set your bobbin aside. Now we're going to thread our machine to sew. So following the solid lines on my machine, I go underneath this little hook and over top. It's a little hard to do one-handed. Just slide it under and over. A little wire will catch it in that foothold. Next, we'll bring our thread down and it goes around our tension dial. So again, down into this first groove, the one on the right, up around our tension dial. Now there's a hook in the left groove that you can bring up by turning the dial on the outside of your machine. A little hook, I don't know why I always think it looks like a rabbit, will appear at the top, and we're going to loop our string over top of that moving hook. Now, just above our needle, we have one final hook that aligns our string properly down here, just above our foot. Loop in behind from the right, and now we're ready to thread our needle. Thread your thread through the needle and then take it below your foot. So it goes through the groove on your foot at the front and out towards the back left. So about 11 o'clock. That's where we're going to keep our string when we're sewing. Now, our last step is to thread our bobbin onto our machine. Open up the bottom of your machine and take out your bobbin case. We're going to insert our bobbin into the bobbin case with the thread running in the direction of the metal groove. And we're going to take our thread and guide it through that little crack until the thread comes out the little hole, like this. Holding on to the back arm, we're going to put our bobbin back into the machine with the little straight arm clicked upwards at 12 o'clock. The string from your bobbin should be hanging out of your machine. We're going to use the thread from the needle to loop on to the bobbin thread and guide it out of our machine up to the top left where our top string is. So hold on to the thread that's coming out of your needle, and you're going to use the dial on the side of your machine to rotate your needle down twice. As it comes down, you'll see there's a tiny string looping across the bobbin. That's the thread from the top, and it's going to naturally just grab onto the thread from our bobbin right here. So our thread from our bobbin is there. You can see the thread from the needle starting to come down. With one more turn of the dial, the top thread creates a loop that pulls the bobbin thread up and through our little feed dogs out to where our needle is. Now I use my scissors to just gently pull this loop through, and you have two strings now coming out the left of your machine. Boom. Now we'll just close up the bottom of our machine and we are ready to sew our first project. So today, for our example, I am making reusable wrapping paper. These are thrifted curtains that I got at the thrift shop, and I'm just measuring them out as you would measure wrapping paper for a present. Now, because I'm just kind of eyeballing it, it's going to be a little different than when we set a pattern on our fabric. But it's very important that your fabric is flattened out as smooth as possible. So see how I have a present in the way over on the left? We want to make sure when we're actually cutting out a proper pattern that your fabric is not only ironed, freshly laundered, dried, then ironed. It also should be spread out perfectly flat on the floor. Again, these are just wrapping papers, but ironing your fabric before you lay out your pattern and cut will make a huge difference in the quality of your sewing. And as we learn to sew together, you'll also see that it's quite common to iron as you go along. So here I'm just trimming up the edge because, again, I didn't measure anything. I was just doing it with my heart and my eyes. It's now time to sew our very first seam. So today's seam is a little different. I'm doing a zigzag that goes over the edge of the fabric, And this is designed to help the fabric not fray. So I'm doing a pretty wide zigzag, setting my machine to 3, my step to about 3 as well. And I'm just aligning with the middle because that's a little bit easier with what I'm doing right now. For tension, this fabric is very lightweight, not as light as chiffon. It is 100% polyester though. So I'm doing my tension on my machine at, I think, 2.5, just under 3. So you'll see I've lowered the foot down to hold onto my fabric. But before we start any sewing, always drop the needle down into your fabric first. This helps you double check where your seam is going to set on your fabric. And it also helps hold your fabric in place just as you're getting started. So when you're first learning to sew, I suggest you go nice and slow. It's not a race. So this is a little later on. I've changed colors, but I wanted to show you how my needle is going outside to the right of my fabric. So a general rule of thumb when you're sewing is you don't want to sew off the end of your fabric. You can cause your bobbin thread to get all knotted up. But when you're doing a zigzag stitch, it's okay if one of the down points of the needle, so on the right for me, is off the fabric because this creates a looping effect. And that's what's going to help prevent our fabric from fraying. This would be also a great job to do if you had a serging machine. So as I approach the end, I slow down and we're getting ready to turn the corner. I'm going to use the hand dial to make sure that the needle stays in the fabric as I rotate the corner. I've lifted the foot up so the fabric moves easily underneath, and now I set the foot back down. It's also very important when we're sewing to make sure that the fabric leading into the machine is also straight. So you'll see how I spread it out here to make sure whatever's leading up into the machine is as smooth and flat as possible. It makes a big difference. If you have something huge and it's twisted and pulling on your machine, it's going to cause your seam to be a little wonky. You'll always be fighting to keep it straight instead of allowing the fabric to sit as it's supposed to, nice and flat. I've slowed down as I approach the end of my seam, and then I'm using my reverse button. So we go backwards on a seam only for about 1 centimeter and then forward to continue finishing off the seam. That makes sure that the seam doesn't unwind on itself. And we're done. So pull yourself about 6 inches of string before you cut it. We don't want our string to retract and end up going back down into our bobbin, and then we'll have to rethread it. Okay, so a few tips if you're just getting started. The way my mom taught me how to sew was coloring pages. So print yourself out a pattern on a white piece of paper or grab a page from a coloring book and use an old needle and just sew along the outlines of the picture. This teaches you speed and control, how your hands should be placed to make sure that your lines and seams are as smooth as possible. Or you can jump right in and start something fun and easy like these reusable wrapping papers. I think they look absolutely fabulous and we'll have them for years and years to come. Thank you so much for spending the evening with me. I hope you enjoyed this quick witchy tutorial on how to use your sewing machine. I look forward to making more witchy tutorials for everyone. If you have any ideas, leave them in the comments below. And until next time, I'm the Great North Witch, and this is The Aligned Path.